So, a Ukrainian commander, he's actually the intel chief of the Azov Brigade, is going to explain in the first article, the first of five big stories, how Ukraine's going to win. I think he's right. I think there's a lot to this about what Ukraine's doing differently than what Russia's going to be doing as we move into the summer offensive, or the second big summer offensive. The first one kind of flopped for the Russians. If you don't know me, my name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. If you enjoy knowing what's going on in the world around you, particularly in Ukraine, please consider subscribing. All right, so we're going to start here with this Azov intel chief. Azov's intel chief lays out Ukraine's evolving war doctrine, from drone strikes to long war reforms, and warns the West Russia's war is global. Okay, so we get into the actual article in the Kyiv Post, and here we are. 31-year-old Ilya Gandov-Samelenko, an intelligence commander in Ukraine's Azov Corps. He says the battlefield for him is as much digital as mental as physical. It's a layered war where speed, clarity, and control determine survival. That's right. There's a hot war, there's an intelligence war, there's a propaganda war, and everything's layered one on top of the other. Just like on the battlefield, there's tanks and artillery and drones and satellites and, right, same kind of thing, but with all these other pieces. Okay. He says, once I was a personality. Now I'm a function, Gandalf says plainly. I have no future. I have no past. I have no name, no personality. I just perform a function. This function is to ensure that the war is done correctly. And when the war is done correctly, there will be victory. Well, what does correctly look like? We have to try to understand that. Originally from Kyiv, Gandalf studied history before joining the Ukrainian armed forces in 2015, a year after Russia seized Crimea. Within months of deploying to the front, he lost an eye and most of his left arm in battle. Later, or rather than stepping back, he returned to his unit with a titanium hook in place of a hand, his defiant presence earning him the mythic reputation among comrades and commanders alike. Gandalf was among those who held out for months underground before he was taken prisoner and held in brutal conditions for 120 days. The experience reshaped his view of the war. Quote, "The only way to negotiate with Russia is by submitting them to our will, through the destruction of their offensive potential." That's right. We don't hear enough of that. We hear all this like, oh, you just have to get along. You have to play nice with them. Maybe if you're kind, or, they'll reciprocate. Now, as an intelligence commander in one of Ukraine's most reform-driven military corps, Gandalf is helping redefine how the war is fought and won. He tracks patterns of drone footage, interprets shifts in Russian propaganda, and analyzes enemy movements before they unfold. Right. You got to see all these pieces. If you're just looking at one little piece, you're not going to see the whole. But sometimes the propaganda messaging tells you something about what's going on, or the pattern of the drone strikes tells you about what's going on or not going on. But his responsibilities extend beyond the traditional military reconnaissance, incorporating economic indicators, enemy propaganda, social media analysis. It's a sophisticated, holistic approach to warfare. That's right. He's got it just like Gerasimov actually understands this too. On the Russian side, Gerasimov doctrine is incorporating all these kinds of things. Without modern ways of sourcing information, we'll do a worse job, Gandalf says. We cannot just stick to the military ways of reconnaissance. We have to have the broader picture, and that's going to be useful, and that's going to help him prevail. But there's more to that. There's a lot more, and this was what excited me. The clarity of purpose extends to the battlefield itself, where intelligence, timing, and precision increasingly define Ukraine's advantage. For Gandalf, the future of warfare is not in brute force, but in this type of systems disruption, hitting the right target at the right moment with minimal losses. Okay, you want to do that? Listen to this. This precision sharply contrasts with Russia's indiscriminate bombardments, which have made the combat zone in Ukraine resemble World War I. And because they have too many soldiers and they don't know what to do with them, they just throw them into the thick of the fight and they waste their soldiers, where the Ukrainians aren't doing that. Russia's frontline tactics reveal a reliance on sheer mass rather than strategy or skill. They waste hundreds, thousands of troops just attempting an assault. The real game changer behind Ukraine's ability to keep resisting a much larger invading force after years of brutal attacks is structural reform. Now, this was near and dear to my heart, right? As you know, I'm a management professor and I focus on leadership. That's my area of expertise. This is spot on. This is exactly what they should be doing. Their military successes are not because they're better, he explains. It's because of our mistakes that could be corrected. Like, so when Russia scores some kind of victory, it's because the Ukrainians screwed up, is what he's saying. Or in some cases, like Andrivka, I guess it was. I'm trying to remember where, like, they ran out of ammunition in some places, or ammunition was withheld by the U.S. or whatever. It's because of those kinds of mistakes. Azov, which began as a 12th Brigade of Ukraine's National Guard, was officially elevated to a corps status in 2025. Now operating as the first Azov Corps, Gandalf and his counterparts championed decentralization, empowering junior commanders with autonomy and faster decision-making. Spot on. This is exactly what they need to be doing. They need to be pushing the decision-making down as far down the chain as they can so that they can make on-the-ground quick reaction decisions, empowering junior commanders. With decentralized systems and great focus on the sergeants, the lower-level commanders, you will most likely be able to have better results quicker, faster, and with fewer casualties. It's very similar to NATO, U.S. kind of doctrine, as opposed to a Soviet command and control from above. Any negotiations with Russia, any political statements, any publications, it doesn't mean anything, he insists, whatever the Russians say about peace. This diplomatic paper means nothing, costs nothing, he says. The only way to negotiate with Russia is by submitting them to our will through the destruction of their offensive potential, destroying 1,000 more tanks or 100,000 personnel more. That's how you negotiate with Russia. I think he's right. So I think he's right that you have to have it, all the layered pieces, you have to decentralize, and you have to realize what you're dealing with Russia. He invokes Sun Tzu's timeless advice: the officer should not be surprised by enemy actions because he must predict the enemy actions. And that's what they're doing. Russia doesn't stop where the maps end, Gandalf says firmly. It's a war of political, cultural, psychological, and global. Failing to see that now is failing to prepare. I have high hopes for Gandalf. Like this, he's spot on in the way that he's seeing things, and this kind of thing gives me great hope for Ukraine moving forward. Right now, well, let's do that before I say this. Part of this was things like Spiderweb, which was in the works for 2 years before it was launched. And now Russia is reaping the benefits. It's almost like the dividends of Operation Spiderweb, because now at the Kazakhstan border, there are massive lines of Russian trucks lined up. Why? Because they have to check every single truck. So the dividends of Spiderweb are paying off in this congestion in Russia. They can't afford not to check every truck, because if they don't check every truck, well, another Spiderweb could happen, and they know it. What used to take under an hour now leaves drivers stuck for up to 10 days. That's the kind of focus, that's the kind of long-range planning that he's talking about here. Now, let's go to the next big story. Ukraine's parliament has officially appointed Yulia Servanenko as the country's new prime minister. Servanenko, 39, served as deputy prime minister and minister of economy. Okay, nothing surprising there. She said this: "It's a great honor for me to lead the government of Ukraine today. War leaves no room for delay. We must act swiftly and decisively. Our priorities for the first 6 months are clear. Reliable supply for the army." Good. I want to hear that. Expansion of domestic weapons production. Good. Want to hear that. Boosting technological strength of our defense forces. Good. The same urgency must apply to the economy as we make every effort to support Ukrainian entrepreneurs. I'm liking what I'm hearing. Listen to this. It's like the economic version of what the intelligence commander just said. In this regard, we need swift and tangible actions, comprehensive deregulation, that's removing obstacles from the way, an end to unlawful pressure on business, acceleration of large-scale privatization, further implementation of effective support tools. It's like saying the same equivalent of, we got to support the sergeants and the lieutenants on the ground to make more effective decisions. That's what they're saying here. The goal is clear. Made in Ukraine must become a mark of strength across more goods, more industries, and more markets. So I'm liking everything that I'm seeing about Servanenko so far. Now, the secret is out. Stefanshana will be the next ambassador to the U.S. Wait a minute. Didn't you just say, Gerdes, that it was going to be the former defense minister, Umerov, who was going to be there? Yes, I looked it up. It turns out the U.S. rejected Umerov as the new ambassador, and Umerov's going to take place in somewhere, maybe in a defense council or something along those lines. They'll find a useful place for him. They're not putting him out to pasture. But Washington wasn't wanting him. Until Washington approves her, she will serve as special envoy of the president of Ukraine for the development of cooperation with the United States of America. Stefanishina has been Ukraine's deputy prime minister for European integration. Why am I not being able to pronounce a simple word like that? Integration, excuse me, and key to fulfilling the requirements for future EU membership. So she's been useful, and she will continue to be useful in that role. Okay, now let's turn our attention to what's going on in Russia. Russia is rapidly turning into North Korea. I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that they're becoming more authoritarian, not necessarily more communist, although there's little glimmers of that here and there, but more authoritarian, doubling down on the control of their people. Now they will punish for searching forbidden information and advertising VPNs. If you're advertising the use of a VPN in order to get around things, you can be punished for that. Welcome to the land of opportunities where Big Brother is watching you. So here in reading today's Russian papers, Steve Rosenberg talks about this, and I queued it up to the right place here. So let's listen to like a minute of it.
From boosting state control online to reducing individualism in Russian society. And this article in today's Moskovsky Komsomolets. For many years, the Western world reaped the benefits of individualistic Protestant ethics and bourgeois freedoms. In the post-Soviet period, contrary to all common sense, we, Russia, tried obsequiously to make our way of life fit a Western frame. And in many ways, we became like them. In all areas of public life, individualism completely replaced collective principles. However, time puts everything in its place and starkly shows that the only way to survive geopolitical mayhem is by following the tried and tested canons of the past and not capitalist formulas of the petty bourgeoisie. And
what they want to go back to former Soviet kind of ways of doing things? Like this is just some crazy talk here. It's really, really remarkable to see that they're actually saying this sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, next, let's turn our attention to what's going on in Hungary. Orban today says, we don't even know what Ukraine is. How can we even make a deal? Listen to this. This is an extension of what Putin's rhetoric would be from a European president or prime minister. Our first priority must be to achieve a ceasefire and peace as soon as possible. Then to establish a security guarantee that even defines what Ukraine is. Because today we don't know what Ukraine is. I know what Ukraine is. I don't understand what he doesn't know. We do not know where the borders are. I know where the borders are. We do not know how many citizens it has. Once this is achieved, we must immediately reach an agreement with the Russians. We must settle whether Russia will participate in the European economy, whether we will be able to place our products in their market, and we also must agree on arms control, because if things continue the way that they are now, we would have to spend another 5% of our gross national product on weapons. So we need to reach an agreement with the Russians. Once that is done, Europe must form a strategic alliance with Ukraine where it's worth regulating and Ukraine cooperates with European Union without Ukraine actually becoming a member of the European Union. Well, the good news is that Orban is actually going to be out by the time that any of this kind of thing happens. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be out. I mean, things could change. There's a long time in politics between now and February of next year when his election is. But he's underwater in the polls right now. But that's the way that he's talking about this. Okay. Meanwhile, let's look at the United States. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says that within the time frame, that's 50 days, if Russia refuses to legitimately agree to a ceasefire, then, so there's this if-then statement, they will face very steep tariffs. They will also face secondary sanctions. Okay, so yeah, countries purchasing oil from Russia will be sanctioned as well, and of course that will go do deep damage to Russia's economy because they won't be able to buy that oil, or they'll peel off from buying that oil and that sort of thing. Okay, so with that, I understand when folks like Gary Kasparov say this, because I get the skepticism. There's only been one noticeable zag compared to lots of zigs. To paraphrase Archimedes, he says, "Give Trump a lever against Russia, and he'll move the deadline." I get it. I totally understand the skepticism, but look at who's not being skeptical of this. Alexander Dugin saying, "I'm so disappointed and sad about Trump. Maybe he'll recover." By now, he goes deeper and deeper into the swamp, abandoning his base, losing any credibility. Politics is about an ideology, a history, about ideas. It's not business as usual. So he's sad about Trump going back to hating on Russia, right? And talking about deeper into the swamp or the deep state, that sort of thing. Professor Jeffrey Sachs talking about how we're run by the military-industrial complex, and Trump is just a sideshow. Listen to this.
Run by the military-industrial complex. Trump is a sideshow. What Trump has done in recent weeks with Ukraine, with the Middle East, with China, with Epstein tapes, with all of it, is just fall into line as presidents are supposed to do. MAGA turns out it's a campaign slogan, of course. It's nothing new.
Wow. So he's saying that Trump has pivoted. It's pretty clear Trump has pivoted in some way. Whether it'll hold up, whether it'll be a continual thing, whether it'll be ongoing, I don't know. I can't predict that, but something has changed. Even Spetsnaz 007, a very pro-Russian account on X, was saying the Epstein list is a hoax. Send weapons to Ukraine. Look at me. I am the deep state now. Well, okay. So that whole deep state, that's only MAGA really uses that language. And that means the cabal of uniparty people who are just keeping things as usual. And he was supposed to be the disruptor. Well, like, if they're saying that, they're showing you that they're unhappy that he's not going the way that he was going previously. Okay. And what's going to happen? Senate Majority Leader John Thune says Republicans are ready to pass this sanctions bill against Russia once President Trump gives the green light. We must do everything possible to help Ukraine succeed, pressure Russia to coming to the negotiating table. Thune has been a good, solid voice for Ukraine, not quite as solid as McConnell, his former boss. Thune was the understudy of McConnell, and McConnell was the Senate Majority Leader or equivalent for 20 years. Okay, last little bit. Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down over eastern Ukraine today, in 2014. Okay, 11 years ago, killing all 298 people on board, 17 nations, including 196 Dutch, 38 Australian citizens. A Dutch-led investigation concluded that the aircraft was struck by a Russian-supplied Buk missile launched from the territory held by Russian forces and Russian-backed militants. The missile system was traced back to Russia's 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade in Kursk. Okay. The victims came from a dozen countries. Following years of investigations, the European Court of Human Rights formally recognized Russia's responsibility for the downing. Yet 11 years later, Russia has refused to admit its guilt. Moscow continues to lie, deny, and attempt to shift blame onto Ukraine. Accountability for Russia's war crimes, including MH17, is essential justice, not only a moral obligation. It's a condition for restoring international law and global security. I want you to look at this picture because we're going to end with this picture. We're going to come back to this in just a moment, but here's even Darth Putin on this day in 2014. MH17 shot itself down with a Buk system, and the rebels suddenly denied that they had admitted having. Here's a history of our MH17 propaganda that shows that we don't do it so that you can believe something. We do it so that you believe nothing, and more importantly, do nothing. Okay, version 1. It was a rebel captured Buk that shot down a cargo plane. Version 2, it was a Ukrainian Su-25. Version 3 was actually a MH370 that was piloted by a suicide crew. Version 4, it was a 20 millimeter radar guided gun. Version 5, Su-27. That was version 4. Version 5, the bomb. Version 6, it was a Buk, but Russia doesn't have any of the type. And it's one thing after another, but Russia did it. But I want you to have this image in your head. This is a soldier holding up a little stuffed monkey that was part of the wreckage because there were children on board, and this was horrific. It was just a horrific tragedy, and it should never have happened. And Russia, like the Soviet Union that collapsed but never took responsibility for the heinous crimes of the Soviet era, Russia keeps going, just like they keep going because they never had to account for things like this. This is where we are today on July 17th, 2025. Tell me what you think about what you heard today. I'm greatly encouraged when I think about that Russia's strategy and Ukrainian strategy are in two very different places. And I think the Ukrainians are in good shape moving forward. It's going to be tough, but I think they're in good shape moving forward. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.